Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of FT Live. And today we're going to talk all about how do we think about starting to future-proof our finance team, because there's a lot of stuff that's happening right now in terms of new technology, pace of change. And I think it's important that we think about not only where we are now, but also where do we want to be in 5 years. So today's session is all about that. We're going to talk about the new normal. What does normal look like for a lot of finance teams today, and what should the basics that we have in place be for each role or for each ledger, I should say. And then we're going to think about what does it mean, what do we need to be thinking about for how we move forwards. How do we get ourselves in a position that we're able to take advantage of all the new and great technology that's about to hit us. So okay, so let's get started with today's session. So today we're going to talk about the new normal in finance, so future-proofing your finance team. For those of you that, in terms of what we're going to cover, so we can talk about what's kind of driven some of the changes that we're seeing today. What do different roles and areas look like, both previously and right now? And what does that mean for the future? What's coming down the track? Things we need to consider in terms of team, things we need to consider in terms of people and skills. And of course, as always, I really love it when we get comments and a conversation happening in the chat. So if you're joining us live, then absolutely, please do send a message, say hello. And would love to get your question as and when they hit as well. So in terms of what we're seeing right now, so just before we start though, I want to say, obviously, introductions to myself. So my name is Hannah Munro. I'm head of transformation here at ITAS. And we are a technology partner. So we both implement technology, so we get it working for customers, particularly in this Sage software, but we also spend a lot of time helping people understand how to transform their teams, helping them manage change and sort of embed good process and best practice into their software and into their team. So for those of you that missed last session, so we talked about how can we achieve more with less. There's, I know sometimes budgets can be tight. So a bit about how can we get more out of what we've already got or achieve the same results with a bit less effort, both in terms of time, but also cost as well. So that is now available on demand on YouTube and on our website, www.itassolutions.co.uk. Okay, so on to today's topic. So let's just think about what's happened over the last couple of years. We've seen a massive change in both culture, but also technology. So I think COVID was a real game changer, not just in terms of the impact it had on the economy and how that works, but also in terms of how it changed people's perspective on things like remote and flexible working. I think, if you told us prior to COVID that we would have this expectation of being able to work from home, being able to work from anywhere in the world, then that was a rarity versus the sort of the status quo. And I think as much as some organizations are trying to roll that back and get back to, full days in the office, I think the reality of the world we're living in right now is that I personally feel like flexible working is only going to increase because people have got a flavor of it as they've gone through COVID. It's worked really well, particularly for certain demographics, and that is only going to continue. And I think that there is this piece around work-life balance, which is becoming more and more of a conversation in sort of day-to-day life. So I think that for me is a big, we're seeing it impacting a lot of the conversations we're having. Teams are going global. There's a lot more globalization happening at the moment that we're seeing, and also that people are, they're working from various locations. So historically, people would recruit locally. They'd only find finance talent within a certain distance. And if it wasn't local, they'd expect them to move. That is now changing. There's a lot more fully remote roles, and certainly when there's an absence of talent, which there's been shortages. I was literally speaking to somebody today that's trying to fill 2 roles. And so, that is a massive challenge, I think, for a lot of people, is finding not only the right people, as in culturally, but also the right skill set as well. I also think cloud has been accelerated. So, we can say that COVID impacted that and it drove the adoption of cloud a lot faster, but it's now become so commonplace. And with cloud has come flexibility in the options that we're working with, but also the ability to roll out new features, new functionality, new capabilities a lot faster. So that's changing how we're working. And I don't think I could talk about what the future of finance without talking about AI. And I do want to really stress that AI for me is right now is bleeding edge. So, it's right at the beginning of its journey, but it's quickly developing and new capabilities are coming through. And even at this early stage, you can already see the impact it's going to have on finance particularly, right? So you're probably feeling and seeing it in things like sales and marketing, but actually I think finance is an ideal opportunity to utilize some of its capabilities, but it is in its early stages. And actually, because of what we do in finance, some of the confidentiality and the integrity piece and the compliance piece that we need to manage in finance, actually, I think it's even more important that AI rollout is managed effectively. I also think that there's an increasing awareness. In fact, I would say there's absolutely been an increasing awareness over the last 5 years of the need for good data for management teams. I think the expectation has changed. I remember, sitting in meetings 5-6 years ago where people are like, I just want to make sure I get my monthly reports on my desk. That has now changed to, I want flash reporting. I want instant access to my companies and organizations' performance. How can you enable that? So that shift is really changing, and not only the speed but the accuracy and the context around that data is changing. So all of a sudden the expectations of businesses have changed on finance and reporting capabilities within an organization. So that's again driving the shift in terms of technology and how we're needing to work. I also think that we have a more technically enabled or tech-friendly workforce in this instance. People are, in most instances, are leaning into technology and wanting to use it. They have expectations for what systems should do for them, which is great. We are starting to see people making decisions. So finance leaders, finance directors that are leaning into technology versus away from it. So that's an exciting trend, but it does mean that, we have to make sure that we're thinking about, implement those technologies well and driving that change in the right way. So what are we going to talk about? So I'm just going to give you some examples of how things have changed in just a few years, right? And how not only are different areas looking now, but how will they look in 5 years' time? And some of this is speculative, of course, because as much as I like to keep pace with the developments that are happening, I think, technology is developing, the pace at which technology is accelerating and developing is accelerating. And so actually, this might not be a 5-year roadmap. This might be a 3-year roadmap. I'm both really excited and also slightly nervous about the amount of new capabilities that we're going to get in the next couple of years. So for me, this is why I wanted to have this conversation, is I do feel like finance needs to get ready to take advantage of that. And I think those finance leaders that do get their teams in a position to take advantage of it are those that are going to stand out from the rest. So, and I like, the CFOs I'm working with and that listen to the podcast to be ahead of the curve. So let's talk about what that could look like. So if we think about, the traditional accounts payable, right? So, I'd say back in the day, it wasn't actually that long ago. And I think, and there's a lot of people that are still doing some of this in this way now. So there would be paper-based POs, so you'd have a physical document that somebody prints and signs. Some people have graduated to having an Excel document that people print and sign, or doing stuff via email. But in principle, we had a document that was produced and was manually distributed, whether it's via email or being passed around the office. Now, in the current environment, that's all digital. So whether it's on an app, whether it's on a laptop, people are creating purchase orders within the system. So they have digital workflows. So we're no longer, or should no longer, be sending emails back and forth. It should all be done through a digital authorization system so that you have that inbuilt control around who needs to authorize that, who does it need to go to, and also all of the information that should enable you to sign off that purchase document is sitting within the system. So I think that's the first thing, is that we've moved from, I guess, paper-based or email-based trails to digital purchasing workflows that are sitting in a shared portal, shared system that enables us to manage those processes and work that through. I think so. If we think about budgets, so historically budgets would be checked sometimes post-purchase. So, how are we tracking? And all of that would be in the hands of the budget holder for them to really manage. And what I've seen is a trend to actually being more open with individuals within an organization about what budgets are available. I think because we're doing more collaboration around budgets generally, there's a lot more awareness around, what limits we need to manage, and almost putting that power back into the hands of the day-to-day members of the team that are asking for those kind of budgets. Now, obviously that varies from organization to organization, but I'm seeing a more proactive approach to budget management. It's moving away from being post-purchase to not only being pre-PO, pre-approval, but also pre-PO. So we're actually giving sort of the end users access to get visibility of, is this in scope? Is this in budget? And I think that's a really great step, because a bit like when you're managing projects and project budgets, the more financially enabled that your project managers are, the more financially enabled your end users are, the better the process works, and the more likely they are to effectively manage procurement. So we talked about invoicing being manually checked. So when we talk about purchase invoices being received, so historically, and I actually it wasn't that long ago that I was speaking to people that were literally receiving either purchase invoices in the post, or they were receiving that email, then printing them off, putting a stamp on it, and then filing it in a cabinet. And then manually checking those lines, put it in a folder, handing that folder to somebody, walk around to get things approved, right? So like historically, all of that has been very much an eyes on and a manual check. Now what we've got is not only transactions being entered automatically through OCR, which is when they scan in the PDFs or scan in the documents and push them into the system, but also it's doing some of the automated checking. So does the value match? Does the quantity match? If so, push it through. So people are starting to use technology to do more of the validation aspects of their purchasing. At the moment, there's still an element of coding to be done, depending on how well the original document's been entered and checked and coded to the right nominals, then some of that can be automated. But you're starting to see that being more and more automated, and actually managing documents by exception versus handballing or eyeballing every single document that goes through purchasing. And that is a big change, right? And it can be specifically for those that are handling large volumes of transactions, it can be a big shift. We're also seeing, in terms of how we talked about a bit about, stamping the document, filing it. So we're finding, we need to keep records, we have a compliance requirement, we have to do that. But actually that's gone, and certainly in most instances that I'm working with now, it's very rare now that I would meet, I still do, but very rare, have anybody that's actually storing invoices in boxes. I think we're all aware of the value of going paperless. And if you're not there, this is one area where the ROI is obvious in terms of it's easy to calculate, and there's no sort of uncertainty around the ROI. So if you're not already paperless, that's definitely something that needs to be shifted. And I guess the other thing that we're now seeing is that historically people would get obviously supplier statements at the end of a month, the end of a quarter. and go through and sort of check them off manually with a highlighter, print them off, check them off manually. We're now seeing technology that automates that statement checking, again, to make sure you don't have any surprising cost that's hitting that. So that historically has been manual. It is now automated as well. So we've very much in actually quite a short space of time managed to automate a lot of that purchasing piece. We're starting to use technology to enter and validate, which is great. So where is that going to go? So the reality is that as we move forwards, we're going to see a couple of things. So we're seeing EDI in some of the big sort of manufacturing environments, but that's actually going to become more common. So this concept of directly connecting to your customers so that they can procure from you, but also to be able to send off invoices and push them directly into your supplier system is going to become almost like the way that we operate. So with the increase in APIs, with the building of what we call of communities and the almost like the connections between different systems, that's become incredibly more common. So for me, I think EDI is the next step. So actually we move away from sending an email to just triggering a to be able to trigger an invoice to be sent directly to another person's system, because you not only save your time, you save your suppliers or you save your customers time entering it as well. I think we're going to see some more use of AI for assessing, fraud opportunities, some more validation around that. So checking, because we're sharing more data between us and suppliers, us and customers, I think more validation around who's being paid what and by whom, more validation around, is this a correct invoice? Because, everyone's having to go digital with some implementation of some of the new tax laws around things like MTD. It's starting to make people start digital versus it becoming something you do when you're a bit bigger. So I think that's going to have that. I also think that we are also going to have less typing things into documents and more, I'm going to call it conversational purchasing. So if you think about how you might buy or purchase your grocery shopping, you would just say, hey, Alexa, can you add, washing tablets to my shopping list, right? Imagine doing that in a work context. So, hey Alexa, or hey, whatever tool that you guys that we're using, once AI kicks in and it's able to converse with us, can you speak to IT about a new laptop for me, please? Yeah, and then that actually looking at doing that. So for me, I can see that happening. I can see a more conversational approach to purchasing and procurement, which hopefully will make it less onerous for people to enter it, which means it's more likely to happen. So those are the three sort of predictions that I have for how I see accounts payable working. But as you can see, I think it's going to accelerate, and certainly once AI becomes mainstream and embedded into our finance products, I think we're going to see a massive shift in how we create and work with documents. So accounts receivable. So historically, let's think about how this has changed. So historically, finance would type invoices and orders into the system. And I'm going to be, and I have to say this, like across the board, if you are manually doing that right now, you need to think about why, because, orders should be coming directly from your CRM. They should be coming directly from your website into the system, or from your project management software. If you're a service-based business, they should be feeding directly in and being generated from your contract management solution to create your invoices. So in this current environment, there should be very few times where you are manually typing in an item and a description and a quantity and a price. It should all be fed through from your sales organization in some way. Yeah, your sales or production organization. So I think that's what I'm seeing right now. And I think because of the increased use of APIs, and I'll talk about this in terms of how you're selecting systems, but APIs are genuinely driving a massive change in how we share and push data across. So that's something to consider. The other thing as well is that, historically invoices were printed out and sent. So we're stuck in the post and sent to people. And, there is an argument that might increase awareness of that invoice. But the reality is that now pretty much everybody emails invoices. And very often people will have the ability to access a portal where they can download copies of their invoices if they've lost it, for instance. So, there's more self-serving happening. And I think a lot of that is driven by the fact that you've got people in different time zones, people working flexible hours. And, I think on both sides, waiting for an email to, writing an email, waiting for it to come back is not a great experience. I think we're going to see an improvement in things like self-service portals as we go forwards. And that's, I think, one of the interesting technologies at the moment that I don't think we're taking advantage of. Chasing. So historically, we'd chase, whether that's by email, by letter, by phone call, and all of that would be done by a person. They would write the email, they would write or type the letter and print it out, stick it in the post. We're now on to automated chasing. So we are now, setting up cadences. We're setting up predefined templates for how that is done, and then using those credit controllers for just the more conversational piece, like having a conversation and phoning them, rather than doing the admin. So again, that's something that's already in play and it's available now. And I'm seeing a lot of credit control teams take advantage of that. And how we're collecting money has changed. So, historically it was very much cash, card, or check. We've now got direct debits, and that's improving. Direct payments, backs, payment platforms that are doing things like payment, staggering payments or invoice financing. So I think, the expansion of financial services to all levels of organizations, historically it was the realm of the larger organizations, is opening up a lot in terms of integrations and requirements there. So what we're seeing and what we're looking for with all of these things is that things are speeding into the system. We go back to where we started about, what's the demand for data, is that we need to get things processing faster, and see how that is feeding in. And again, thinking about, what we're doing in terms of payment platforms and making sure that they integrate, that we've got those direct feeds is really important. So, interesting comment as well about, we'll talk about where the future's going, but AI chat GPT models in accounting. Yeah, and I think the challenge we've got in a lot of the accounting sphere right now is confidentiality, because obviously when you're using tools like chat GPT and other AI platforms, is the issue around you can't feed data into it, because obviously that's then publicly available. So that's why I say, actually, I think, learning to use those tools for sort of day-to-day things that don't involve feeding data in is interesting. But actually what's going to be really exciting is when we're able to apply that to our own environments and use chat GPT style solutions within our finance solutions. So that's when I feel like we can expand and genuinely harness AI as finance teams when those sit actually in our private cloud environments versus the publicly available ones that are there now. Because at the moment, if you can't put that data in, because what you can do is ask for things like, how do I calculate? It can scan and give you that information. But what we need, and what I'm excited to see is coming, is that AI built into business operations software. So that's where I think that's going to be a big step change for finance. So I think what we're going to get for accounts receivable, and I'm starting to see this already, which I get very excited about, is AI-based chasing and alerts. So, populating customized emails for credit chasing. I can imagine it tailoring sequences. So it looking at, how this customer, if I do this sequence, what does that mean in terms of how quickly they pay? What's the best way of adapting and tailoring, a bit like you do in marketing, using AI to actually tailor sequences, to tailor messaging according to that individual and, all of the rules. So I think that's going to develop. So, and that's going to be really exciting in terms of how we go through. Again, I think EDI. So when we can receive, like orders and or information, around when something's been paid directly from customers, because we've got that community connection. that will be really interesting. And Frank, you talked about Microsoft. Yeah, Copilot's actually going to be fairly open, and I've seen some really interesting conversations around that and how actually other software is starting to leveraging things like Copilot within their solutions as well. So, I do think, like I said, I think AI is incredibly powerful. I just think and will be, it's going to be so impactful on finance. I just think it's such an early stage at the moment. It's not yet getting into mainstream, but it's not far away, right? So I think there's an exciting opportunity. And thinking about the applications. So when you can build, when you can train and educate AI on how how fundamentally your business works, and it can learn and adapt to your customers, to your suppliers, to your operations, that's when we're going to see a big impact and start to see some genuine transformations in how productive both teams and businesses are. And then in terms of things like banking cash flow, so we talked about obviously the scale of the different payment methods. We're getting money from lots of different revenue streams. Like it used to be one. Customers want to choose to pay in different way, on different terms. We're sending money to suppliers in different ways and on different terms. So what we're seeing now is an evolve of, we've seen changes to the banking system. So in Europe and the UK, we are actually quite advanced in terms of our banking system compared to some other areas. So, the open banking legislation that came out has really sort of accelerated things like, connections direct to bank. So the moment we've obviously most have got bank feeds, and so that has lent to automated reconciliations. So what we're seeing now is that rather than getting either printing off a statement or having a statement on the screen and manually ticking everything off, we've now got automated rule-based matching. It's not quite AI yet, but we're seeing rule-based matching. So if this equals this, then we can match that off. We're seeing more creation rules. So when they see a particular transaction in a bank feed, it will automatically create that and match it and allocate it to an invoice, for example. So that I think is only going to extend once we have AI in that, because AI will be able to learn not just what it should do generally, but what it should do specific to your finance department in your organization, and actually go that. So I think making sure that you've started that track and making sure you have things like bank feeds in place, that you're starting to build rules and logics around how customers pay you, how they send money, how you match, is a really good first step forwards. But that's going to accelerate fairly fast, I think. And if you think about how much time is spent on bank rec, you don't want to be chasing things that are already paid. It's wasted effort, it's wasted resource. So that's only going to continue as we go through. And then nominals, like historically we've done manual journals. I think what I'm seeing now is increase in things like automated rule-based allocations. So can we reallocate that to a certain, can we automatically distribute that across certain departments or cost centers and things like that? We're seeing RevRec. So historically that has been done in spreadsheets. That's been driven from the beginning with things like contract management solutions pushing through the right data to manage RevRec and having that pushing journals directly into the system, so you can use it for things like forecasting and planning. We're seeing prepayment. So as we receive invoices, we are able to recognize that something's obviously covering a certain period, and it's automating that as well. So, all of those sort of manual in things that we'd previously done in Excel would be a manual at end of journal. We need to push that through at the point of entry. So I think the biggest shift is that historically nominal was being done sort of at the end of the month. We do a set of adjustments at the end of the month. What I'm seeing now, and what is kind of standard best practice, is that at the point of entry of the transaction, you're doing those adjustments, because unless we get to that sort of point of entry adjustment, you can't get real-time data, because there's no point looking at P&L if the revenue that you've entered on an invoice hasn't been recognized and posted to your reports. So that's a big shift, I think, in terms of how it used to be done versus how it's being done now. And it's fairly common practice as well, just to put that out there. So that's becoming more and more as a, like, I would say, standard practice versus something that's new and unique. But again, there's a lot of organizations we're speaking to, you know, normally they come to us when they haven't been able to do that, or that's too challenging. So those are the sorts of things we're seeing. And the same with things like intercompany, so automated back and forth around things like intercompany. So some of this stuff is very much the realms of middle and large organizations. But I think the biggest trend is about data flowing directly through in the correct format at point of entry versus having to be adjusted post entry or at the end of the month. So kind of how we're going to see things continue to change. I think that is going to be even more automated in that, things will push through even at source with that coding. I think we'll see AI being used for things like error correction for reconciliation. So rather than having to, when your age debtors and your creditors or doesn't balance, being able to pull out your balance sheet and your obviously your debtor ledgers, for instance, and be able to figure out where the difference is. I think that will be something that will be done by AI. It will help you find the difference. But that's going back to the fact that in order to give AI access to some of this, it cannot be a publicly available piece. It has to have access to your data, which is why I think once we get access to AI within our standard finance platforms, and it is coming, guys, right? I've seen some really interesting pieces already this year around how this is going to be embedded. Once it's actually embedded into our day-to-day, and they give us the ability to train and develop that AI, that's when we're going to see a massive shift in how we work, I think. We're able to train it to do these kind of models. And reporting. So I think historically data was very much siloed. It was sitting in lots of different systems. And if you wanted to put it together, that was basically an Excel exercise. Yeah, you were, and somebody became very good at VLOOKUPs. I think the big shift that we've seen is that APIs, so the ability to connect into different systems and share data between different systems, has massively improved data sharing. So things like customers are synced across your CRM, your finance system, your contract management system, your project management system, etc. So all of that is connected. And we now have the concept of synced data sets. I also think that more than finance data is being shared across as well. So we're sharing more sort of contextual data, things like numbers of FTEs being shared across. That sort of day-to-day piece is coming through and being synced across from different systems. And I guess the third thing is that we've then very often, what we're starting to see is that rather than siloed systems, we're also starting to see like data warehousing and an increased use of data lakes to be able to mine data and to put that in. And that requires obviously a BI layer. So the historical way of working was that you would normally use Excel to do all this reporting. And whether that was, doing ODBC links, etc., to put it in, that was the typical way that you produce reports. And there was an incredible Excel reports being built. I think now the shift has very much been to reporting in BI layers or tools that sit on top of or across your systems. And that was historically the sort of the premise of the big enterprises. It's now become pretty much mainstream. So most medium-sized organizations, and I'm starting to see it in some small ones, are actually looking at their reporting layer. And with that comes challenges, because obviously you need to connect data from different systems. So I think people are becoming more, as I said, more aware of data, and more importance is being put on the integrity of data. So we're seeing that shift. But yeah, the BI layers has become an important part of your architecture for your sort of enterprise level systems. I also think that the way that stakeholders want to consume data. Now, there are still those that want to be given a reporting pack that they get sent and then they consume. what I'm seeing is that is still fairly common for things like board members. Yeah, they want more direct access, but they do expect that kind of to be given reporting and given information. But from a management and exec level, that's completely changed. Right. So I've seen a massive shift just in the last couple of years around almost that interactive reporting requirements coming through, so that reports are being consumed and interacted with, and rather, on dashboards with visuals versus sort of being served reports. And I think that is changing. Obviously, it's accelerating in certain industries more than others, depending on the management team that's in there, but that's become even more important. And I think that comes down to like the organization's awareness of the value of fast and accurate data. So I think the expectations of the consumers are changing, and particularly the expectations of the management, because those individuals have grown up with access to whatever they want whenever they want it, that sort of ask on demand. And again, if you think about the remote working, the shift to hybrid working, we have to move to more on-demand style communication, including with data, to enable that flexi working environment. And I also think that we are moving from historical analysis. So very much, it was at the end of the month, you get a management pack and jobs are good in. We're now seeing flash reporting, so weekly based reporting, if not on demand and real time. We're seeing that reporting piece needing to be produced in days, and actually like standard is a couple of days after close, not weeks, which it used to be. And then we're also seeing more scenario-based predictive modeling. So if this happens, what does that do? And I think where things are going to change, I think we're going to see a couple of things. So what we're going to see is more predictive analytics. So I think AI is going to be able to connect dots of data from different data sources a lot better than we can at the moment, and actually give us more predictive analytics. And it can look at more at our leading metrics to anticipate our lagging. So, and I think it's going to notice and have more granularity around its predictive trends. So, rather than this, at the moment, I think people make a lot of generalizations in their predictions, and their assumptions are fairly broad. So I think AI is going to be able to combine that and do a much more detailed analysis and prediction and better predictions, basically. I think it'll be able to increase predictive, reliability or consistency. I also think that the focus is going to be on reporting tools. I know there's a lot of talk at the moment around finance teams needing to learn coding, things like Python. And I absolutely think that if people are interested in that should be an area to explore. I am cautious though, because I'm not so sure. I think there's going to be a suite of reporting tools that mean that you don't need to learn those predictive language. I think you're going to be able to converse. You're going to be able to do conversational reporting. So you'll be able to ask AI to calculate something for you and put those things together, so that you don't actually have to write code yourself. That, again, it feels a little bit like sci-fi and space age, but I do think if I see what I've seen in certain BI layers and reporting layers, where you've got like a chat bot that can interrogate your data, and I think that's just going to get even cleverer, and it's going to learn. So I actually think we're not going to need to be as technically competent in data languages as I think we sometimes think we need to be. So I think that's an interesting piece. I think it's very much AI is going to help us to almost navigate that need for a technical skill set. I also think that we're going to have more out of the box data lakes, data pools, right? Because AI itself needs data to learn from, and the better quality of the data, obviously, the better it learns, and the more reliable it is. So I think there's going to be an interesting piece around how we share data, how we anonymize data, and access almost shared metrics, shared benchmarks around how we operate. So yeah, there's some interesting pieces, and I think again, some of this can feel a little bit like sci-fi, but I'm pretty sure a few years ago we would have been saying the same about some of the tools we have now. So So what does this mean for teams? And this is where I kind of wanted to end up today. It's like, if we just see like how far we've come in a short space of time, you can just imagine how far we're going to go in the next 5 years. So I think, I think anyone that doesn't realize that the transactional element of finance is going to start to disappear is not been paying attention. So I feel like this teams will shrink. I think you're going to need less people to do finance. But I think that there's going to be obviously an increased responsibility for stewardship, for making sure how things like these AI tools are used, how data is used, and how we are compliant as an organization is going to increase. Things like ESG is going to add another burden, I think, on finance. So I do think our team, we will need less resources, but I also do think our responsibilities are going to widen in finance. So that's going to be a change. And so obviously there's a skill set involved there. I genuinely believe that AI is going to be the reason we're able to shift to a 4-day work week within a number of years versus decades. I think the increase, if you see what's happened in the last couple of years in terms of the increase in flexible working, I think it's a no-brainer that that's going to happen. Now, how that's going to be managed, obviously, it's going to depend on organizations, but I think it's becoming talked about more and more. But also, I think that AI is going to enable that. So rather than having the conversation about, we're going to let this many heads go, I think it's going to be like, how can we use this tool to change our working patterns and work differently? So I think that's certainly the way that I'm seeing it. Obviously there's going to be some cost savings and productivity savings with the new technology that's coming through, but I also think there's a positive story to have as we go through this. I do think that finance is going to have to become more embedded within the business. So and what I mean by that is, rather than because we are going to have, like, this AI and these tools are going to have to be trained, and they're going to have to, and part of that training is understanding business context. So understanding where data is flowing from, understanding the context that's the front end of a lot of the data and how it's going to apply is going to be important for finance to do. Whereas very often finance can kind of be hidden away. I think finance needs to go out into the business to have these conversations and bring that context back to be able to be able to train procurement AI, accounts receivable AI, AR AI, and also reporting AI as well. And I had a really interesting conversation about, like data quality, data integrity, literally yesterday, which is coming out on the podcast. And I think that's just reinforced my belief that, finance need to have an increased business acumen. I also, and what I'm seeing is that people are choosing to stay in finance roles with organizations that invest in infrastructure. I think those, especially those talented individuals with the right attitude, with naturally technical skills, they are choosing finance teams that get it, that are investing. So I also think that this is a key consideration for leaders to think that if we don't invest in improving how we operate and how we work, then we are going to have a challenge with recruitment and or retention. So I think that's an important part. And if we think about, some of the challenges we've got now in terms of finding staff, that's only going to continue if we don't keep up the pace. I also think that, if we look at the increased productivity and those individuals not having to have so many people in the team, it means less team management, right? So, there are some good things that are going to come out of the new technology and improve things like, reduce recruiting costs, less team management. But it also means that, with a smaller team, you have to make sure all of your bases are covered. So what does this mean for people? So if I was to say things I would consider as a finance leader right now, is I would be thinking about more flexible team members. So thinking about, if, we're not going to necessarily have to do in every single ledger, or the amount of work to be done, certainly from a transactional perspective, is going to be smaller. And more condensed, right? It's going to be by exception versus eyeballing every transaction. So especially in those smaller or mid-sized organizations, you're going to need individuals that can move across roles and capabilities, right? They might bring in specialists to do, some work with a particular technology, tax setup, etc. But I actually think we're going to have broader finance skills that are going to go across team versus having a lot of specialists in a certain area. And I think particularly AI is going to support that. So it's once it's trained, what it's doing, it's going to surface issues and things things to consider, to look at to those individuals. And again, I think we will bring in specialists to deal with certain challenges and problems or improvements. But I actually think we're going to have a broader finance skill set. I also think we're going to actively need individuals with non-finance skills. So actually, I think one of the big areas we need to invest in finance right now is things like project management skills, business acumen skills, emotional intelligence, change management, process design. Because if we don't do that, we won't be able to take advantage of all of this new technology that's about to hit us. I think we will constantly be working with tools that's AI tools that sit within finance to be able to do that. And I think if we're not already if you think about the kind of the projects that most finance teams sit, and whether it's just because we work in technology, but I'm constantly seeing finance teams year on year look to streamline, improve and optimize how they're working. So having a core set of skills around project management, change management, and process improvement will mean that you have a more effective ability to roll out that new technology, those improved changes. I also think we need to really look for technical ability and technical acuity is what I've called it, but the ability to understand technology and see its application, and the ability to critically think your way around a problem as part of finance. Because we're not just going to be enterers of data now, we are going to be process designers working alongside an AI to define where something's going to go and how it's going to be coded, how it's going to work. I also feel like we're at a point where people need to think about making sure that they're giving opportunities to get experience in different areas across finance, because when we need to roll out new projects, we're able to use our existing resources. So thinking about task sharing, about knowledge sharing across teams is a great way to build experience, but also being able to share responsibilities for implementation of new processes, of new technology, and making sure you're getting your middle tier and your lower, less experienced finance people involved in those projects, because you're going to need them in the next sort of couple of years to be able to lead and take those different projects forwards. And also obviously building exposure to the business. So I think, and I think most people are aware that, finance needs to be more embedded versus siloed, but actually thinking about your strategy for how you're going to build exposure to the business. And I've seen some really powerful small units that really understand the business that they work in, and they are so much more effective, even in the transactional piece, right? They're able to challenge more effectively. They're able to spot check and see things and issues more effectively. So for me, that's a win-win, even in this current technological landscape. I also think as finance leaders, we need to think about planning for investment. So regardless of whether, what stage you're at in your technology, like maturity, I think having an ongoing plan and budget for developing systems, processes, and thinking about what's coming, and really focus on systems and technology that has an inbuilt connectivity function. If it doesn't have an API, you seriously need to challenge whether it's the right solution. Because as a lot of these new things are going to be plug and play. They're going to be using these API connections to connect in and pull data out and share data back and do changes and recommendations. So really thinking about connected systems versus siloed systems, and making sure that whatever system you're looking at has that sort of inbuilt infrastructure to connect to some of the new technology that's coming out. The reality is that we can't automate what isn't, or it's harder to automate things that aren't streamlined and productive. So what I mean by that is that it's a lot easier to automate a simple process, right? And I constantly say this. So I think genuinely challenging complexity within your business, making sure there is a genuine, business case for that complexity is really important. So working with other areas of the business to challenge and remove complexity within your process wherever possible will only help you as we go to streamline and automate more and more. Also getting hold of, if you don't already know, is your data architecture, but also the quality of your data. Have you identified gaps in it? Do you understand, how reliable, how consistent it is? What kind of variations are they within the normal range? All that kind of assessment of your current data quality, where it sits, who has responsibility for it, what the maintenance plan is really important, because again, once the AI tools and things hit, they will be using your existing data sets to work from. So making sure that you've really understood your data architecture and quality is important. And of course, investing in the wider business understanding of finance. And we talk a lot about finance, learning more about the business, but actually building an understanding of finance and how finance looks at data, the impact of the day-to-day operations of the business on the P&L, etc., and building that sort of wider finance acumen in the wider business is really important. Because again, they will be getting involved in things like training AI tools for their day-to-day. So if you can connect the dots, the more knowledgeable the people are that are training this new technology, the more impactful it's going to be. Okay, so I think I've done pretty well to actually cover all of that in an hour. So I want to say thank you to you guys all for attending. Our next session, which is coming up in May, is going to be on the process improvement maturity scale. So we've talked a little bit about this today, but process improvement has to be should be a massive part of any finance transformation project. So we're going to talk about what does good look like for different scales of maturity, and how do we measure ourselves against that. So that's what we're going to talk about on the next session on Financial Transformation Live. So today we've covered what's driving some of the changes we're seeing right now, what do different roles and look like. So what should you be doing right now versus what was the case sort of a couple of years back versus what is going to be the case in the next few years. What does that mean for how we resource, how we recruit, how we look at technology, how we think about our team operations and roles? And also, obviously, we've had some great comments around the use of ChatGPT as well, and other solutions coming through. So if you have any questions, guys, please do feel free to pop them in the chat. We have, for those of you that are on the journey to transforming, please don't forget we have a whole suite of resources on our website. Things like looking at how you can get hold of that month-end close time and get it down to those couple of days. How you can start to remove the volume of spreadsheets that you have and get your data into systems where we can access that data and use it. And also starting to think more about how you can rethink some of your processes, reduce that complexity, and improve the productivity within your finance team. So thank you all for joining me today. I hope this has been useful and give you some food for thought. And of course, like anything, please do, I'm an open book. Please do reach out to me if you've got any thoughts, comments, or areas that you think we should improve on in the next session. Would love to have your feedback, constructive or positive. It's all useful feedback. So please do reach out if you have any comments. Thank you again to those that are joining live. For those that are listening, again, the offer's open there. Please do reach out if you have any questions, any follow-up, any thoughts, ideas based on what we've talked about. Would love to hear from you. Thanks again for joining us on Financial Transformation Live, and I'll see you next time.